So according to the 2025 Builder 100 list put out by Builder Magazine, Lennar Homes is number 2 among U.S. home builders by number of closings and by revenue. So they are the second largest new home builder in the United States. D.R. Horton, by the way, holds the number 1 spot. For 2024, Lennar had $33.8 billion in revenue and 80,210 closings. That includes some condos across multiple U.S. regions. And Lennar operates in 26 states throughout 75 markets. With that backdrop, I want to share a story I saw out of Wolf Street yesterday that, frankly, the statistics were even somewhat shocking and surprising to me. How truly bad things are with the real estate market and with the home builders in this country. Before I jump into the article, as I always humbly ask, if you're not subscribed to the channel, I'd really appreciate you guys hitting the subscribe button so we can keep growing the community. So again, out of Wolf Street yesterday, homebuilder Lennar reported earnings yesterday evening, which would have been Thursday evening. Revenues, listen to this, revenues from home building fell 8.8% year over year in quarter 3. Incentives needed to make those deals jumped to 14.3% per home sold. Think about that, which slashed its gross margins to 17.5% in quarter 3 from 22.5% a year ago. Operating earnings from home building plunged 49%, net income plunged 50%, and earnings per share plunged by 46%. And at first glance, one might read that and say, gosh, that's really terrible for Lennar. But as I continue to share some stats with you, what Lennar did during the post-pandemic years when money became cheap, and how they throttled home buyers with these products and with upgrades and with higher mortgages to buy their mass-produced products. Love to get your thoughts and comments. I'm not so sure that we should be feeling sorry for Lennar, because you may say, well, when you see this and you understand it, they got pretty greedy. It says Lennar's average selling price in quarter 3 dropped by 9% year over year to $383,000, below where it had been in 2019, and by 22% from the price peak in quarter 3 2022, when the FOMO, fear of missing out, age-old buyers were willing to pay whatever because money was free. So obviously part of the responsibility falls on the people that were piling into these Lennar homes and buying them, closing the escrows. But some of it, I think, falls back also on the developers. And look, I know how it goes. I've represented for years new home builders, and the old kind of the joke was some of these guys, as they had lines. This is like going back to 2000, before the great financial crisis. They would have lines, waiting lists, and lines of people to buy their products with upgrades. And the joke was these guys all had Lamborghinis sitting in garages, on the property, that they kept kind of out of the eyesight of the would-be buyers, right? Because they didn't really want people to know how much money they were raking in. And we all know what happened, right, as that unwound, okay? So here's a little picture I'll share with you. Lennar average price per home sold, including incentives, and it starts quarter 3 2019 and ends quarter 3 of this year, okay? So check this out. You guys see that? Look at the run up in the average price per home when money after the pandemic was free flowing. So one might say, well, look, that's just the market, right? And they're entitled to capture whatever market share they can and the highest price they can for their products. Lennar's homes, and some might say, no, that was just pure greed, and now they kind of are getting what they had coming to them. Again, leave your thoughts and comments, kind of where you are in that analysis. Lennar's homes are mass market products. It says they expand the supply of homes that people can more easily afford, and more supply and lower prices are exactly what this price-ravaged market needs. From quarter 3 through peak in quarter 3 2022, Lennar jacked up the average price you saw in that chart by 25%. Lennar has now given up the entire price spike plus some, and the average price, again, is below where it was in 2019. As a result, it says of the much lower average selling prices, sales so far have held up. The company delivered 21,584 homes, which is up a hair from a year ago, and new orders jumped by 12% to 23,000 homes. The message is lost, it says, and listen to this, we've shared this before as well, about the existing home sellers are simply not getting the cue, okay? And it's going to end badly for them also. It says the message is lost on sellers of existing single-family homes whose sales plunged by about 25% from 2019 and by over 30% from 2021 because prices are too high and sellers are loath to budge, and home builders are now eating their lunch, right? So we've heard about this. I've shared it on videos previously, how existing home sellers are pulling their homes off the market. They're pouting, they're whining because they're not getting their asking price. They don't want to budge. Some are stuck. Some can't budge that much if they have a loan that is approaching the fair market value of the property, okay? For the ones that are just being greedy, they're going to get slaughtered, okay? So Lennar's lower prices, it says, did the trick, kept volumes up, and boosted new orders, but they crushed the inflated gross margins from yesteryear, right? So gross margins in 2022 third quarter were almost 30%. That dropped to 22.5% quarter 3 last year, and now it's 17.5% quarter 3 of 2025, okay? Again, those gross margins back in 2022 third quarter, money was still really cheap, right? And when money is cheap, people disregard, okay? They ignore the higher price tag, okay? But once you clean out those, those FOMOs, and the developers, and they're clearing huge profits for themselves, and the home buyers are straddling themselves with, much bigger mortgages. But as we know, the free money train kind of came to an end as the Fed started to, raise the rates. So now what are we going to have? We're going to have, we had the Fed just cut by 25 basis points last week and projecting a couple more cuts. So if we get a 75 basis point, let's say, cumulative cut this year, maybe a little bit more next year, I'd like to get your thoughts and comments. Again, what is that really going to do to unstick or unfreeze this situation? Okay, is it going to miraculously, enable people to flood back into the housing market? The answer is, from my perspective, as a layperson, not an economist, absolutely not. Unless you keep seeing prices continue to fall in connection with, let's say, retracing of some of these mortgage rates, then you might get buyers coming back into the market, okay? Lennar, like all home builders, figures the cost of incentives and mortgage rate buy downs into the average price per home. So all of the costs of those incentives, says, are included. However, when it reports, the Census Bureau reports on new home sales, it's based upon the median price on the contract of those deals, okay? Does not include the cost of mortgage rate buy downs and all the incentives, okay? So what that means is that the contract prices have actually dropped far less than actual new home prices and understate the actual price drops, okay? So the publicized figures, again, don't include all the hidden stuff, the rate buy downs, and these massive, you heard, almost 15% of the sale price of the home it comes from incentives now. That's not even figured in the Census Bureau new home sales figures. So keep that in mind next time we see the new home sales numbers released and the mainstream media touts it as a great thing. Okay, median contract price per Census Bureau across the U.S. by all home builders, it says dropped by 5.9% year over year in July, and the 3-month average dropped by 1.8% year over year and 5.9% from the peak in late 2022. Again, those numbers are probably far greater than that because those numbers do not reflect the rate buy downs and the incentives, okay, which continue to grow so they can move units. Sales volume was difficult to maintain and required additional incentives in order to achieve our expected pace and to avoid building excess inventory, according to the Lennar executive. So the takeaway here is that we have things adjusting back to the mean, okay? You now have Lennar's prices pre-2019, okay? So you've gone up and you've come back down. Doesn't it always work out that way? And when are the existing home sellers going to figure out that's going to be the same result? When is the stock market going to figure out it's going to be the same result? We'll have to wait and see. We're a little bit long today. As always, I do appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoy the content, leave me a like. If you're not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button and leave your thoughts and comments. With that being said, I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.